All right, guys. So, welcome back. This is part 2 for Tessellations. You should hopefully be at a place where you have many, many images stacked up on your slice. Cool. We want to make sure that all of your images look great before we get carried away in the actual process of tessellating. So make sure that if you are at a point that looks sort of like what I have up here on my screen, that you share this with me as a crit file so that we can still adjust and move things around. You most likely will have to. What I have going on here is an example. So I obviously did not spend the same amount of time as you should be spending on this. So I expect for yours to look better. If it doesn't, then I need for you to spend more time doing that. So notice once again that I have a pretty large image in my background to fill in some of the space. You shouldn't be seeing any of that obnoxious color of the original slice. And also a lot of my images are hanging off of the edges so that everything is fully packed with images. I also used a bicycle as a repeating pattern for this top edge here, and I tried to place this particular bicycle wheel in such a way that when I cut my slice, it will remain looking like a whole bicycle wheel. We'll see how things go once I actually cut this out and tessellate it, and I can pretty much promise you that after tessellating the first time, you'll have a couple small things you'll want to adjust. So make sure that you have your file saved out with a lot of your layers over on the side, still easy for you to edit. Notice that my layers are all smashed down together into this one. You can do that by using your shift key to select all the layers with your images and pressing Control or Command E. Cool? Make sure that you keep it separate from your original layer though, because what you want to do now is eyeball off all of our images and eyeball on our magenta or whatever color original slice. At this point, we want to be very, very careful about how we are selecting our slice for a second time because this is our final official edge to the piece we will be tessellating. So I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool and I'm going to go directly from this corner directly to my very center. And notice that my tablet is trying to snap me to where it feels the center point is. So I might need to fight with it a little or make sure that I'm going to tap this exactly where I want for it to be. And then I'm going to come up straight through that center and back again to my beginning point. So I have this selection now. I really just used my original slice as a guide. If your guide isn't effective, then just take the time to make sure that you are selecting as perfect of a slice as possible. Now that we are here on this layer, we're going to go select inverse and we're going to hit delete. If for some reason why it turns it black instead of delete, make sure you're on this eraser guy up here. And don't forget to deselect once you are done with your selection process. All right, let's move into the actual tessellating process. The first thing I want for you to do is zoom out just enough that you can see both sides of your document up here for this portion, okay? We are now going to control click and, control click and duplicate this layer. So I have two now, they're right on top of each other. And I'm going to press Command T and carefully flip this over to the other side. Now, the actual flipping process isn't that difficult. The part where I want for you to really take your time is to make sure that you have stretched it to be exact right to that other corner. And also you will most likely need to hit enter to place it, change to your move tool, and then use your arrow keys on your keyboard so that everything is lined up as perfectly as possible. If you are not confident about your alignment, then what I want for you to do is zoom in really close and use your arrow keys to nudge it just slightly in and out and make sure that you are very, very happy with this because we're about to stick these two layers together and you won't be able to move them again after that. So I'm very happy with that alignment. I think it looks great. So we are going to use our Shift key and Command E or Control E to stick them together. So that is our first step. Cool. This is a very good point to see if your outside corners are still matching up perfectly. If you feel like they're slightly off, you can nudge this with your arrow keys, or you can even use your Control T and stretch it out just a smidge. I think that's really close, so I'm going to leave it like that. And now that we have this larger double slice, right, we have a quarter, we are going to rasterize. We're going to duplicate this. So duplicate layer. And for this one now, we are going to flip it vertically. So Control T. And, oh, I forgot that this is really, really tall. So we're going to zoom out a little extra to make sure we're happy with that. And flip it this way. Once again, I am aiming for this corner right here so I can get the bikes lined up on it. If you feel like that's not really happening for you, go ahead and hit your enter to place it. Use your move tool to nudge it so that the tips line up as close as possible. Let's zoom in a little so we can see what we're doing. And I know from experience that you don't want for the tips to be separate like this. You want to make sure that they're just kissing, maybe even overlapping a tiny bit. It depends on what kind of edge selection you have. But I think that will work nicely for my selection. So let's zoom out again a little bit and see how that bottom corner is looking. I think that looks pretty good, except for that I can pull the slice to be a little bit taller so the bikes are closer to the edge. So Control T and stretch it just a smidge more. And I think that will work wonderful. Now that I have this, I'm going to mash these layers together. So Shift and Control E. And I'm going to copy this, duplicate. And now with this one, this is where it's interesting. You can see how successfully you've done this. We are going to rotate this layer 90 degrees clockwise. If when you do this, you're like, something's definitely not right, then it might be worthwhile to attempt this process again. But let's see how we do. Let's zoom out just a smidge. And okay, it only wants to zoom out a lot. So we are going to do our Command T. I'm going to zoom out more. And we're going to rotate. Now notice when I rotate, if I press the Shift key, it'll lock it at 90, which is really nice. So I can feel confident that I'm pretty stinking close to what I want. So this is already getting pretty close. I can use my move tool first to get it as close as possible. And then I can always use my arrow keys. Notice I have a gap over here on this side. So I might end up needing to adjust that later. We'll have to see how it goes. So, there we go. It's a little laggy. Okay, so I think the best thing to do in a situation like this, where you have these little hairlines on all your sides, is to go back to the part where you were joining these two and let them overlap a little bit more. Notice that my slice gets a little shallow on the outside edges, so that's probably where I went a little wrong. I can always try using my nudge, but notice I just end up with hairlines in other parts when I do that. So I was just a tiny bit off. So let's go back a few steps. Back. I think I might need to actually place this first. Okay. And let's go a little bit further back if we can. There we go. So I now want to nudge this guy up so that is a little bit closer and we are less likely to have hairlines between our sections. Oh, I have both selected. We don't want that. We only want that layer selected. So let's try that. Once again, I need to zoom out and see what's going on with my edges. And it looks like, once again, I need to stretch this one down here a little bit, but also, you notice that it helps that I have extra space outside of my slice at the top and bottom edges so that I can adjust things a little bit if I feel I need to. So notice that now that I use the arrow keys to nudge it up or down, I don't feel the need to stretch that bottom slice anymore. All right, so copy this and rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. Let's see that a little bit more. Shift key to lock it at 90. And arrow keys. And this looks like this just might do it. Yay! Okay, so let's zoom in a little. Oh, not what I meant to do. Let's zoom in a little. And I am so much closer now on this side, which is wonderful. Make sure not to give up on this process until you do not have hairlines between your slices. Got it? Cool? Yes. Unfortunately, this is easier to do in Photoshop because we can flip layers horizontally and vertically without worrying about, here we go, without worrying about the ratio changing at all. So that can be annoying in some ways. But also notice that I can select this half of this one slice and use my Control T on that to fill in that little gap. I think that can work. So let's stretch it just a bit. And also nudge it down. Lovely. All right, there we go. That is a decent alignment right there. Once again, you are aiming not for overlapping slices, but you also don't want hairlines between things. This process can be a little finicky, so if it takes you longer than me, don't worry about it. It can be a little tedious. Once you get to this point right here, make sure that you mash together those last two layers and that you save it out as a JPEG. For some of you, you haven't been doing that consistently, so let's go over that right now. In Krita, when you go File, Save As, you want to make sure to name your document not the same as thinking everybody else in the class. I don't know whose scarf is whose if you just name it scarf. So make sure that it has your name attached to it, right? Just so that I know what's up. And then let's make sure that you're saving it to your desktop or whatever appropriate place it is and hit save. That's for your generic format. And then for your other format here, make sure to actually choose JPEG. And there's a lot of file formats in here, and a lot of them are very useful, especially TIFFs. But for these purposes of sharing online, you want that guy. So you can hit save again. And 100% is actually best. 80% is okay too. And say okay again. And now you'll have that JPEG, which is the flattened image version that you can share on virtually any platform. It doesn't require Krita to open it. It doesn't require Photoshop. It's just an actual image. Once you get to this point and you're really happy with what you've done, and I've looked at it and said, wow, looks great. What I want for you to then do is a scarf in the other style. And if you're like, Magina, what other style? If you did image-based for this scarf, then for your next one, I want for you to do one using brushes and gradients and selections and just make something really cool and abstract. If for your first scarf you actually did that with brushes and selections and gradients, then what I want for you to do for your second scarf is something image-based like what I have up here. That is it for today. I do want for you to take your time on this aspect. Don't get sloppy at this point. And then also remember many of the pitfalls that I showed you last time. You definitely don't want watermarks on your images. You don't want any little hairlines or messy cutout selections. You want for everything to look as clean as possible. So I hope that this has been going well for you and you'll have time to do a second one. So make sure to understand this process, rewatch these videos. You are welcome to G-chat me or email me during class time if you have any questions. And I'll check in with you soon. Thanks. Bye.